Charles Tarbey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Good weekend of golf?
No, not quite.
No?
A little bit, but mostly a bit of work this time around, just a little bit of catching up to do.
Bit of balancing.
Certainly was. I wish I did play golf a bit more, but I wish I actually played golf. Sorry, Nick. I mean, I go out on the golf course, but I wish I actually played golf. That'd be nice for a change.
Okay. It's a what do they say? Golf is a great way to ruin a good walk.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yes.
So a big show tonight. 13 12 83. Charles is here. If you have any questions about property, he can assist you, maybe buying, selling, investing. He's got a wealth of knowledge. We think some decades worth. Well, we know some decades worth,
Yes,
Charles.
yes, some decades.
Yes, you've been at it for a long time.
I'm certainly feeling it lately too. I got to tell you, I'm not quite sure what's going on. Maybe the old age is kicking in.
Well, you look pretty good.
Hey,
You look
old
very
age
good.
kicking in, yeah.
And if you don't believe me, I mean, you can check the webcams here tonight at talkinglifestyle.com.au, or you can check out Charles tonight on Sky Business.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's on at 9 o'clock tonight. We talk. Tonight's going to be interesting. We're chatting about the tax benefits associated with the property. A great guy called Stuart Waugh, who's from Bell Accountants. He's going to be on the show in the early part, and he likes to really dig deep about what we can and can't do in terms of saving. So he's qualified to talk about that.
Yep.
Whereas as real estate practitioners, we're not supposed to be giving any financial advice, but he's in a position to do that. So tonight should be real good.
Excellent stuff. And for this show, between here and 8 tonight, we're going to be joined by Tom Panos, who's an auctioneer. We'll take a look at the auction clearance rates over the weekend. Just quickly, what were your thoughts of what happened across the weekend?
Still pretty good, and we can get into more detail later on. But no, we don't have that issue of a crash, as was called probably 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The market has slowed in May, and it's a traditional time for it to slow down in terms of its numbers. Sydney and Brisbane were slightly behind, but they've always been ahead. But I don't like to look at it month on month, so we'll see what happens at the end of June or the July quarter. And I think you'll notice that the Sydney, Melbourne markets are still really strong. Brisbane and Adelaide's been growing too in prices, so their two capital cities have been sitting stable for a while. We'll
also go around the grounds because Century 21 has how many offices, remind me?
We keep talking about this. It changes. It depends on how angry some of them are or how I am on the day as to how many want to participate. There's definitely a few hundred offices.
There's a few hundred.
And the good thing about it, although the Australian arm and New Zealand and Papua New Guinea, the Australasian arm is a business that I purchased some time ago, up further north, right up in the top of Asia, in China, there are some 1,800 offices.
Wow.
And there's a strong connection because there are a lot of Australian-born Chinese people, and they've got families they bring out, and they like to buy real estate. That's the big thing. In the US, it's massive as well. So it depends wherever you go, but it's well represented, put it that way.
Well, we can't get the few hundred on tonight as we go around the grounds, but we certainly get two on, one from Warrnambool in Victoria.
Now, I picked, trying to get diverse conversations going each week, diverse regions. And Warrnambool's an incredible city with a lot of history, and I look forward to hearing a bit about that. And,
I've been there many years ago.
Yeah, it's a great place. And
I'm guessing it's the surf and turf capital of Victoria because they grow amazing beef, and it's right on the coast as well.
Yes, it is on the coast. Well, you'd know more about the surf and turf than I would. But then we're going to talk to George Roumanous at Bonnyrigg, and that is an interesting place because Bonnyrigg, as people would remember or recall, was chicken farms and whatever else for many years, and that is an incredible area that's exploded over the last 10 years. So all the way up through to Leppington, out through to Oran Park, those areas are really going crazy, and the infrastructure's there, and the airport's not far away.
Oran Park no longer just a racetrack. It used to be a racetrack.
Yeah, they got 5,000 residential properties out of Oran Park Racetrack.
Wow.
5,000.
Yeah, it's a massive development, isn't it?
And if you think about this location, I say it's close to the airport, you can get on the M7 there in seconds, and if there wasn't any peak hour traffic, you can be sitting at the airport 35 minutes later, or with the new Badgerys Creek Airport, 15-20 minutes. So it's quite a prime position.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing that story. Also tonight, John Cunningham is on board. Now, this guy knows his stuff. He's the president of the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales. No doubt you guys spar and know each other well.
We do. And he's also a very, very successful real estate practitioner, which when you're talking about people who are presidents of institutes, and often you get people elected in those roles that may not have real estate background. John has got an incredible real estate background, so it'd be great to hear from him also tonight.
Yeah, get his thoughts on primarily the New South Wales government has abolished stamp duty for first home buyers.
That's right. And if John is listening right now, John, that's the last time I'm going to say something nice about you. So there you go. There's the first home buyers. That one I'm not sure they've got that right, because the day it was announced, I started checking and I spoke to Tim Lawless. I rang him the next morning. I said, Tim, what do you think? He said, I'm just about to release a blog on this.
Yeah.
I said, well, what about those people that have signed a contract prior to the announcement and leading up to the 1st of July? And guess what? They don't qualify.
Oh, wow.
So it could mean that this marketplace that we're in right now, if we're talking about pricing and whatever else, the Sydney market, even though there's not a lot of homes in that category, there is still stamp duty concessions all the way through. The issue might be that the marketplace could stall a little bit, and the figures we get next month could be distorted again, and that's a bit of a concern. There's talk that people might say, well, gee, I'll withdraw from the sale. Now, if they've signed contracts, they've got to find a really good reason to withdraw, and any vendor's solicitor or conveyancer is not going to advise them to not fight it.
Yep.
So I'm not sure how they're going to deal with that issue.
Okay, and that pegging includes axing stamp duty on homes purchased for less than $650,000, discounts on properties up to $800.
Up to $850, yeah. $850 I think it was. But the issue there, of course, is it's a significant saving, $24,700 odd. And if you look at that, and it did go on to say, the article did go on to say, Tim's article, that people, and if you go onto the OSR's website, that people will still get the benefits of the current grants, but they are a lot lower than $24,700.
Okay. We'll also take a look at proof of local purchaser to the Australian Tax Office, the ATO. Some of those sorts of things coming up tonight, 13 12 83. Those topics and more. Anything you'd love to offer to the show, we'd love to hear from you. Charles Tarbey, as we say, has a wealth of experience in real estate, so he can help you out if you've got any questions for him on that number. So, Charles, first up tonight, I wanted to have a look at this article that we stumbled across today as I was just flicking around the news sites, that it's going to take you an inordinate amount of time, 40 years worth of savings for a Sydney deposit, UBS modelling shows. So, I mean, that's not a great headline if you're wanting to get into the real estate market, suggesting that if you're an average income earner, that's how long it's going to take you to stash away enough to get a deposit. What do you think of that?
Look, I'd have to have a real close look at those numbers, because if somebody is on an average wage, yes, they're going to struggle to do that. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And it'd probably take them 40 years and more. But I think that if you look at some of the salaries that are out there now, and people are always pushing for a bit more, 40 years is a really long time to save for a deposit.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, if you need a deposit for a Sydney home, and if it needed to be 20%, and let's just call it $200,000, it's not going to take somebody 40 years to save that. The biggest concern they have is that the amount of time they might take to save, and whether the market moves faster than their savings.
Yeah.
Now, as we're coming into a more stable market, that's probably going to be unlikely in the next 7 to 10 years. So if they've started saving now, they're probably going to get a very good chance the next 7 to 10 years at the end of that period to buy something before the next cycle moves again.
Okay, well, the article suggests that in that time, 40 years, you could build a decent-sized Egyptian pyramid with manual labour, construct a massive channel connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and then still have another decade up your sleeve to maybe develop the Apollo program to get the first man on the moon. Those sorts of things. Or you could spend that time saving. But that, look, it is crushing news. Not a great headline. As you say, I think it's important to drill down and have a look at these sorts of things a little bit deeper. But that's the forecast from USB's economics team.
Now, USB, I'm sure... UBS, I'm sure they are very well, I guess, researched in what they do. But they were the team that published, probably may not be the same team, but they were the team that published that the market had peaked 6 to 8 weeks ago.
Yep.
With the clearance rates having slowed down. So I don't think so. So the Sydney clearance rates are still pretty strong. The national clearance rates were 73.9%. So they're still pretty good when you look around the countryside. And there's 3 or 4 capital cities in the 70s. So they're still very good clearance rates.
Yeah.
So I don't know that the market's slowed down, and I certainly don't know whether the research they've done is as detailed as you want it to be, whether they did it on a very, very average income or even below average income, I'm not sure.
Certainly first home buyers having a rough time. If you follow the graph, it goes back to 1992. It would suggest that the level of first home buying now is almost as low as what it was in 2004. So it's certainly difficult.
Yeah, it does go in cycles, obviously. It does go in cycles. But look, what they're saying is that if you're 20 years of age now, you're not going to be able to buy a house until you're 60. And by the time you get to that age, Nick, the banks probably won't lend you the money anyway. So you might as well just stay renting where you are. I don't think it's a great headline, no.
Charles Tarbey tonight, 13 12 83, and taking your advice. We're giving out advice. If you've got some questions for Charles tonight, then he can help you through any property matters you may want to run by him on that number or email. Click feedback@talkinglifestyle.com.au. There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world, combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated. Your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. It's no surprise Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent? Contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au. Charles Tarbey here to help tonight, 13 12 83. G'day, Andrew.
Good evening. How are you both?
Well, thanks.
G'day, Andrew. How are you doing?
Good. Now, with your previous comments that came up tonight about the 40 years potentially.
Yes. I hope I wasn't being too cheeky, was I?
No, but I just want to say, and I know there's different times, but I do want to relay this story to you, and
Thank you.
Part of it that'll be relevant to people even today. But my future wife and I, back in 1986, and I know it's a long time ago, but the principles are still the same. We weren't married at the time, but knew we were going to be. We were living in an apartment in Kew in Melbourne, and we decided over a couple of weeks that the best thing would be to bank my wage for the year, live off hers with all outgoings as well as food and rent and what have you, and be very strict about it because we were very social at the time with a few clubs that we were involved with. To let people know that's what we were doing, and we really were very, very strict about it. And in the 12 months to the day, we saved $30,000. Now, back in 1986, that was a fair bit of money.
That's a lot of money, yes.
And we were able to buy our house the following year and have, as well as the deposit, the stamp duty, which it is the highest in Victoria, as we well know, and the conveyancing costs and what have you, and comfortably have a bit left over when we first bought our home.
Now, I did the same thing. I did a similar thing, not quite, I wasn't married at the time, Andrew, but I set aside and I said to my parents, look, would you take so much money off me every week? Just take it off me every week out of this little wage I was getting, and they agreed to do it. And I left enough for me to get a weekly ticket to where I was going and a little bit of social money. And at the end of a year, I saved up just on $3,000 going back in 1973, 74, and that allowed me to buy my first home as well.
Yeah, and as I said, they're two different timelines, and that's drastically different apart, 12 or so years, but the philosophy about it's the same. And in the media in recent times, we've talked about, I think it was, I can't remember if it was the Treasurer or somebody saying that we've got a society that like to go out and have smashed avocado for breakfast on Saturday mornings, and they really should be saving. And it is a lifestyle thing. You've got to decide whether you're just going to do it hard, and it's not forever, but have a really great thing ahead of you.
Yeah, it's good advice, yeah.
It's very tough. It's very hard to really talk about it a lot because a lot of people are really struggling out there and they're finding it difficult, Andrew. But thank you very much
thanks
for telling us that story.
I did say we want advice and we got some. Fantastic.
We did.
Good advice. Just finally, this
very
one, just to finish off this story, the average house price is now 6.5 times the average wage. That has more than doubled in 20 years.
Wow.
There you go. 13-12-83 Property Fast Track tonight with Charles Tarbey. Nick Bennett's my name, and property prices have been surging. We know that in New South Wales for years, and affordability is the worst it's ever been, especially for those first-home buyers. Last week saw the New South Wales state government announce a range of measures designed to tackle the affordability crisis, including axing stamp duty on homes purchased for less than $650K, with discounts on properties up to $800K. Will this make a difference? How much so? Is it too little, too late? Lots of questions. John Cunningham's on board tonight, the president of the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Nick. Good evening, Charles.
Good evening, John. Great to hear your voice. It's been a long time, actually. Last time I saw you, you were presenting at a Real Estate Institute function. So,
absolutely
good to hear what you've got to say, John. This is a really interesting concept with the state government. So I was chatting to Nick earlier on about the concerns that those people who have purchased prior to the 1st of July do not qualify, from what we can see. And so what might happen in the next 3 or 4 weeks is a slowdown or a stall in the market because of this situation. So I don't know what they're going to do about that, but should we be congratulating the state government for this, or something that's like something had to be done, but should we be congratulating them about it?
Look, I think we've got to give some congratulations. They've gone a certain distance with this. Have they gone far enough in terms of the whole review of taxation and the transfer duty issue, because they haven't addressed bracket creep, so that's one element. But I'm intrigued that they've taken the step they have, which is following on from Victoria, where they've given everything away to the first home buyer. Now that's not a bad thing, but I think if you're trying to balance the budget and make sure that you have an equitable property market, I would have loved to have seen some concessions also for the other end of the spectrum, the retiree. Because as you know, Charles, that's where the supply chain is clogged, and we're not getting the free flow of property into the marketplace. But again, I give them credit where credit's due. They did something. Did they do it too little, too late? Yep. We've been at this for, as you know, a long, long time to actually get some concessions for first-home buyers to buy established homes, because that's 90% of the market. That's 90% of first-home.
Well, yeah, of course, they were pushing everybody to the new homes for obvious reasons, so they can get jobs and construction and so on. But that part of the marketplace has been doing very well for a long time, and sometimes it creates an imbalance, and all of a sudden you know what it can be like when you're looking off the plan sales or new properties. Quite often the prices are higher than established. So
well, that's right.
The compensation might be there in cash up front, but it's certainly not there over a period of time in terms of capital loss, if you look at it from that angle.
Completely agree, yeah.
So, John, are you saying you would have liked to have also seen some consideration for folks who may want to sell, who've been in real estate for a very long time, at the perhaps almost retirement end of life?
Absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing in the ageing population and the baby boomer generations that are coming through now is that the choice that they've gotten to move from the family home to a more medium density style living, a townhouse or a penthouse apartment or something more low rise than just the high rise options that we're being offered at the moment. We're discovering on the ground level, that's on the coalface of real estate, what people are after. And what they're after is more choice. We're not delivering the product that the market actually wants to move to. And hence why all the focus has been on the high-rise developments to get product out of the ground as quickly as possible to deliver on that short supply, which in fact has been happening since 2006. We actually have forgotten what we call the missing middle. The missing middle is the missing medium density and missing middle belt of Sydney, where we actually need to produce product to get the whole supply chain moving. So they have done something in these measures to address that, but not enough, because they're relying upon local government to do it for you. And Charles, local government, NIMBY,
we have been talking about local government and state government for quite some time on the show, and the disconnect and the red tape and the green tape just to get things done can be extraordinary. I hate council bashing. They've all got their jobs to do, and sometimes they've got to deal with the local community outrage on certain things, and they've got to take certain sides. But the reality right now is that we have still a continuing issue of supply in some areas. I don't know what's wrong with semi-detached housing. It was the basis of how Sydney was formed, going back many, many years. I don't know why they have to keep going up or going out. There's plenty of ways to... They've tried dual occupancy. They're trying granny flats, all sorts of things. But I'm sure that you can get 3 lovely terraced houses on a piece of land in most areas today.
I totally agree, Charles. I mean, to me, the concept of when they repealed dual occupancy in 2011, it's no coincidence that we went into a supply spiral when that happened. and we replaced it with granny flats, which I personally believe is not the solution because there's no title to it, so therefore it doesn't actually add to the potential transfer opportunities in the marketplace. Dual occupancy enabled, as you say, 2 or 3, maybe even 4, depending on the block, new dwellings to be built that certainly gave opportunities for low-income housing, for investment opportunities for retirees, for actually building more appropriate accommodation to their needs in the same familiar locality. So this is the area that I think really needs to be addressed, because that's the fastest way to get property out of the ground, was the dual occupancy concept. Because you can do it under compliant development and away you go.
John, I think you've nailed something there, and that is a lot of, we'll call them empty nesters, right? They want to remain in the same locale, same location. They've raised kids in and bonded in community for many, many years. So what are they really wanting? What is the ultimate kind of dwelling they're after?
It's interesting, Nick, because we've actually seen what they actually want change significantly in the last 20 years. And they're after a lifestyle choice. And the lifestyle choice is familiarity. It's also safety. They want to live in vibrant, mixed-use communities. So if you look at the inner city, and Charles talked about the semi-detached cottage, those are the places where people now want to live. They want that community spirit. They want multi-leveled societies where you've got from students right through to the elderly, and you've got families and all kinds of things. That's actually the vibrant communities people want to live in. Now, that's in most of the middle ring suburbs. They're actually going that way. We just need to change the dynamic and deliver what people want. And they want a modern property. They want some outdoor space, not too much. They want for the grandkids to come along. So we're not just building enough of that, in my view, and we've just taken a view that higher is better. It's not the answer to everything. We've got a huge amount of people in that over 55 bracket. Right. That have completely different needs to previous generations.
Correct, yeah, it's all changed, hasn't it? You and I fall in that category, John. I think I'm slightly older than you, but we'll talk about that another time.
Well, I moved from an 800 square metre plot of land to 280 square metres.
Wow. And,
that enabled me to build a house that suited my needs more appropriately. And that's an example. I mean, that's a similar thing of saying, like 800 square metres, we can get 4 dwellings on there.
Can I ask you something in regards to what happened with the federal budget, the changes that were made, regulation known as the clearance certificate. Now, this proof of property is not purchased by a foreign buyer. Now, this can cause a lot of grief, particularly if your conveyance is in Orange and you're a Sydney-based person, because I think they have to identify you.
Yeah, look, there's a bit of identification issues there, and that's part of the fair trading requirements in terms of selling any property anyway. You've got to have proof of identity. Once you get that proof of identity, and you can then flow that right through the whole conveyance. So I think this is what the government realised when they brought in the $2 million threshold. They realised there wasn't as many foreign buyers selling properties in that. Some foreign owners selling that property in that price point. The majority actually were in the middle of the market. So they didn't capture probably what they needed to capture, and now there's a huge extra workload on people to achieve it. But at the other side of the coin, we have to look at from a revenue perspective: was there a big leakage? And this is a way of addressing the leakage. So there's a flip side to
You're going to end up with another government department, though, that has to be funded. So it's going to be an interesting concept to see whether it balances the books.
Taxes and inefficient taxes, like stamp duty, one of the most inefficient taxes imaginable. Land tax being one of the most efficient taxes possible. Is this an efficient tax because you've got everyone else doing the work for you?
Yeah, that's right.
An interesting one.
How do you think it's going to affect how auctions and sales go?
Look, I mean, we've been in a market in my business for some time where we saw a lot of $2 million plus properties, and the reality is it's had no impact at all. We're taking the approach that early notification is wise. So every appraisal we do of a property now, in every price point, we're raising this issue immediately. So we're addressing it up front so that our clients are able to respond quickly. And we're getting most certificates now at the point of exchange. Yeah. So I think that's, again, being proactive about this, not sort of expecting it's someone else's responsibility. I think as agents, our responsibility is to advise our clients the best course of action, and this is just one of those elements.
John, just finally, in these announcements from New South Wales Government, the foreign investor surcharge duty has been doubled from 4 to 8%. What effect is that going to have?
Well, I'll preface it by saying be careful what you wish for. The reality of this is that there is a popularist view in the marketplace that foreign investors are the bogeyman. They're causing everyone's grief. Now, the reality is the foreign investors we're talking about, in other words, foreigners who don't live and have resident status in Australia, make up less than 5% of the purchases in New South Wales. Now, what they're doing is they're actually getting property out of the ground in terms of a lot of properties that are being sold off the plan, are being sold to foreign investors. Now, they've brought in also a rule in terms of, from a federal perspective, on a limitation on the number of dwellings that can be sold out of any development for that purpose, and I think that's a smart move. But the
banks, the banks are doing that too. Yes.
And the banks are doing it as well. So there are a whole lot of measures that were put in place to then throw this on top. It's almost like, okay, what happens if those foreign investors go elsewhere?
Yeah, we're in trouble.
One element.
We're in trouble. Yeah, we're in trouble.
And what happens on the flip side? What happens if those foreign investors don't go anywhere and they absorb that? We've actually created a marketplace where they're still in competition with first-home buyers. The government's created more revenue, so that's one objective we've achieved. But we haven't gone anywhere to solving the affordability issue. So that's again, it's a double-edged sword without a doubt. Was it the right decision? It seems to be more political decision than a practical decision.
Okay, so Victoria just finally led with some changes to stamp duty. New South Wales, you could say, have perhaps followed suit. And maybe we'll see this ripple out to other states as well. So forecasting 12 months ahead, how do you see the market?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting question. I've taken the view, and I've made the call a month ago that the market had peaked. And, of course, you're always going to get those sales out of line. Even in the GFC, there were still boom sales happening where high-quality properties on high demand were selling well above reserves. And we're still seeing that happen. But what I'm getting from the ground, and Charles, you probably find it the same thing, that we're tracking our numbers into open homes, they're less. We're tracking the number of bidders registering at auctions, it's less.
Yep.
We're looking at how many properties are selling way over reserve, it's less. They're either just getting there, just getting over, or just falling short. But sales are still happening. To me, that's a great sign. That's a sign that we're very much in that plateau phase of the market. We're in a stable market, which means for buyers and sellers, it's the absolute best time to do it. Now, I'm of the view that if we will have maybe 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% type gains in the next 12 months. It's only going to be minor. But the market's strong, the market's sustainable. We just need more supply.
I have to agree with you completely, John. So it's been fantastic chatting to you. I'd love to get you back on and chat again if we can sometime in the near future.
Thanks, John. John Cunningham, President from the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales on Property Fast Track tonight. Charles Tarbey's here taking your calls. 13 12 83, back in just a moment. Charles Tarbey here tonight, 13 12 83, and he's here to take your calls as we go around the grounds. And Rodney Roberts is on the line from Century 21 Warrnambool. Evening, Rodney.
G'day, Charles. How are you?
Good, thank you. We've got Nick with us as well, Rodney.
G'day,
and he's been to your area. He knows more about your area than I do.
Yeah, that's right. I was there for a Shannon Knoll tour. And I'm just surmising, Rodney, that Warrnambool is the surf and turf capital of Victoria because you've got all those beautiful, lush pastures full of big, beefy, lumpy cows and a lot of excellent seafood nearby as well.
Yes, there certainly is down our way.
Well, Rodney,
as you know, we're a pretty big beef and dairy industry down here.
And that's what we really wanted to find out, right? Because a lot of people, of course, Victorians would know all about your area, but a lot of people around the country may not. So tell us a bit about it.
Pretty much, we're only about 3 hours from Melbourne, down on the southwest coast, but we're right at the end of the Great Ocean Road. You can head directly here, which would take you about 3 hours, but if you head down along the Great Ocean Road, you probably add an extra couple of hours along to your trip there. But look, the sights and things that you see along that road's absolutely magnificent.
You probably want to take a few hours, stop for lunch at a couple of lovely restaurants along the way as well. Rodney, you could buy waterfront properties there for half the price of what Sydney's median price would be.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of properties around there. Looking in around the 800,000, anywhere between 600,000 and 800,000 to get good views. Unfortunately, we probably don't have the demand as what you would have up in Sydney.
Right.
That way. Yeah.
And what about stock levels? How are they looking at the moment?
At the moment, there's about 382 properties on the market as such, and 330 homes and units. There's about 52 units at the moment. So predominantly our area is big on families, and you'll probably get a few semi-retired and retirees head down our way.
And what would your median price be for the area? What would a first-home buyer, say, have to pay for a brand-new 3-bedroom home?
You're looking around that 320,000 mark at the moment.
That's fantastic. I always look up when I hear these prices, and I look at the young John here, the producer, and he just shakes his head. He can't believe how cheap these prices. Ever since I met him, he's gone from buying in Orange to Hobart to down in Adelaide. Now he's going to buy in Warrnambool by the looks of him.
We'll be rid of him forever. Go on.
Yeah,
but we love you, mate.
It's a great area down here.
And employment-wise?
Employment-wise, we've got 3 big dairy factories down here. Your Murray Goulburn, your Warrnambool Cheese and Butter, which has just been brought out by a Canadian company, and Fonterra. But there's also, in the private sector, we do have big abattoirs down here. It employs anywhere between 450 and 500 people as well. We've also just had $100 million spent on the redevelopment of our hospital, which also includes the $30 million cancer centre, which is it's great for our area and saves a lot of people who do have cancer travelling 2 and 3 hours to get to Melbourne.
Yeah, that's a great initiative. We heard about that last week from a local lady, right?
Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah.
And just finally, what are the vacancy rates like right now?
At the moment in rentals, you'd be looking around about maybe 2 to 3%.
You know, it's interesting because you're 3 hours out of Melbourne. Melbourne came in at 1.18% this last week, and Sydney came in at 0.68%. How's that, eh? For a vacancy rate, 0.68%.
Yeah,
so what your area of 3 to 4 is still very, very good, very strong.
Yeah, it is. And that's great, just having the university, as we said, the hospital, and that's growing all the time. And just we get a fair few people out of Melbourne moving down our way just for different jobs and things in the industries down here.
They've gained the equity so they can get down there and buy. It's almost like the Sydney people moving up to Brisbane, Rodney.
Thanks for your time tonight, Rodney.
Thank you very much, Rodney.
Warrnambool, there's the place to go if you want some information. Rodney Roberts at Century 21 can help you out. And let's go now to Century 21 Bonnyrigg and George Roumanous. Hello, George.
Hi, Charles. Hi, Nick. How you going?
Very, very well,
good.
George. I was saying earlier on, we like to try and pick very different areas geographically, and I remember your area, I was talking about the fact that it was chicken farms, lots of acreage out there, all the way through Leppington. My auntie lived in Leppington on 5 acres, and I'm sure she wishes she still had that now, because there was a site in Leppington that I went to see that was 5 acres, George, that sold for $1.75 million many years ago. When I say many, about 6 or 7, and with all the redevelopment came through, they were now allowed to build somewhere in between 300 and 400 apartments, so it's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Absolutely. You know, moving through Bonnyrigg and working our way all the way out down that corridor out to Oran Park even, you're just seeing phenomenal numbers of homes being developed, pockets and pockets of new suburbs coming up every couple of months. Unbelievable growth.
I know from your perspective at Bonnyrigg, you've built a substantial business. You're one of the country's leading real estate agents. And for you to grow your business and grow yourself personally, do you need to move into these locations as well?
Look, yes and no. I mean, Bonnyrigg traditionally was 2.5 hectares of housing commission.
Wow.
So in the early 60s, 70s, once the Italians migrated, and you were spot on about all the farming, because we have a lot of rose farms, a lot of rose farms and even pig farms out our way. So the state government with the federal government set social housing to be one of our forefront leading developments. Only a few years ago, though, in 2003, they looked to redevelop the entire area. And over 13 stages and, good 15 years, they decided they were redeveloping these 500, 600 square metre blocks. And they were putting 2 and 3 dual occupancy homes on them. So we've seen a massive amount of growth. They're really targeting the demographic that we have.
George, those pricing in your area, and that's the sort of developments that other councils need to pay attention to, by the way. But what sort of growth in terms of prices have you had there?
So I remember in 2003, one of the first homes I sold when I took over my business was in that $270,000 mark.
Wow.
So we're talking, 3-bedroom, red brick.
Yep.
We're looking in that $850,000 range.
All right, so that's big growth. That's in a space of about 15 years, you say?
That's right, yeah.
All right.
And if they say real estate doubles every 7.2 years on average, if it climbs, there you go.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
true.
right there.
And George, how do you see things being moving forward? What's your forecast picture for this time next year?
At the moment, stable. Moving into the next 12 months, I can't believe, we're super media sensitive. So, classic example, we saw the state government introduce the legislation to assist first home buyers. Mm-hmm. So over the weekend, we saw a spike in buyers attending open homes and bidding at auction.
And that's exactly what they didn't want to happen, because we don't want to fuel a market that has been already overfueled.
Yeah, exactly. However, I look at, the Southwest Mortgage Belt, Revesby, Bankstown, all the way up to Campbelltown. And if our median home price is $750,000, we're right in that pocket that's going to see a bit more fuel added to that fire.
Yeah. Well,
so I echo a lot of what John Cunningham was saying earlier. Stable yet still active where we are.
okay.
Great to hear. Well, George, thank you very much for taking the time to come on and talk about your area, and wish you all continued success with what you're doing.
Busy place right now, Century 21 Bonnyrigg and George Roumanous. Thanks, mate. Have a great night.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Nick.
See you, mate. Tom Panos, who's an auctioneer, and we'll check the auction clearance rates for us in just a moment. He's up next, 13 12 83. Meantime, if you want to get a call through to Charles Tarbey, he's here for another 8 or 9 minutes or so. So next Monday is a public holiday, the June long weekend, except in Queensland. So it's tipped to be all quiet on the auction front. The weekend just gone, though, has been huge. Belter in Sydney recording its biggest ever June auction Saturday. 789 homes auctioned off. Same story in Melbourne. 1,045 went under the hammer. A cold winter can't stop a hot market. And Tom Panos, an auctioneer with 2 decades worth of experience, is on board tonight. G'day. How are you, Tom?
Hey, Nick. How you going? Hi, Charles.
Tom Panos, where in God's name have you been? We've been looking for you for weeks.
Looking for bargains in Greece.
Did you find any?
There's a lot of it. There's just too many, Nick, to choose from. So I decided to actually do the smart thing. They can keep their property and I can keep my money.
Very good.
They say when a person with money meets a person with experience, the person with the experience winds up with the money, and the person with the money winds up with the experience, Tom. So that could be the way it goes. So, hey, Tom, Sydney had a cracker of a weekend with a record number of listings, but the clearance rate was down to 74-ish. And what do you make of that?
What I make of it, Charles, is that the buyer urgency has definitely changed. And when you look at that clearance rate, it still looks reasonably good. Well, let me tell you mine, Charles. Mine was 9 out of 12. But what you don't see is the real story, that 7 of those properties had one buyer on it, and that it was all a grind.
That's right, yeah.
And that's what people don't see. All they see is this quantitative result that says, 9 out of 12 or 75 or 3/4. But the reality is that every week that's going by, Charles, there are properties that are being sold prior, and they appear as an auction result as a sold because agents like to get the credit of those. There's properties being and Charles, let's face it, they're being sold prior because there's only one bidder, and that's why they're taking the safe option, and that is let's wrap it up with one bidder. I just think that we're beginning to see the emergence of less buyer energy. But in addition to that, I think what explains a lot of the listings being in June and these big numbers is the fact that I think vendors are realising that the party's coming to an end and they're rushing to see whether there's still a chance to get top dollar.
Yeah, and that was the thing we were hoping for. Winter usually stock levels are slower, and we've had 4 weeks of growth in stock. This last week we had a negative 0.58% amount of properties advertised over last week, but that's still really good. That's still a really strong stock, and I think you're right. The sellers are starting to think, well, if I was going to be downsizing, I better do it now because other markets are still moving. If you're downsizing from Sydney and moving to Brisbane market's still on the rise.
Correct. So, Charles, you're absolutely right in being able to... It depends on your situation. You've got to look at 2 chapters in the book. Chapter 1 is what you sell at, and Chapter 2 is what you buy at. So if you're an upgrader, If the market goes down, you're probably better off upgrading in that sort of market. But, Charles, as you make the reference point is if you're downgrading, you're probably trying to get top dollar at that end of the market, and that's why there's been a race. Agents should be happy. You know, as a franchisor, Charles, and an owner of that great group of yours, you guys do well when there's lots of turnover. And that's what I think we're seeing at the moment.
I'm happy to see that because, for me, a boom market is always a disruption to a good real estate agent's business. And the time has arrived. We've talked about a year ago, I think, when you and I chatted, that the agents that know what they're doing are the ones that are really going to do exceptionally well in the marketplace we're heading into, a marketplace where you can get a buyer and a seller and you can create a happy medium for both to negotiate in a steady manner to get a good result for both of them.
Well said. And as I said to a young agent that I ran into the street on Saturday, I was auctioning. He'd only been in real estate for 2-3 years, and he'd been stunned by what's happened in the last 3-4 weeks, that there's no buyer urgency. And he said, "Where to from here, Tom? You're the expert, tell me." I said, "Well, for a start, you can no longer just put the keys in the doors, open up the doors and hope the market's going to put a deal together." I said, "You better learn how to become a real estate salesperson, sir."
Wow, that's great advice. I bet you're going to see a whole lot more of that too, Tom. Wow, good stuff. Tom Panos, it's always a great experience to have your wisdom shared here tonight, and we appreciate it.
Don't be a stranger, Tom.
Thank you.
Good on you, mate. Property Fast Track tonight with Charles Tarbey. We'll see you again next Monday, Charles. Appreciate your time.
Much, Nick. Oh, actually, I'm not here, but I will be represented to some degree.
Here in spirit nonetheless.
Absolutely.
See you, mate.